You're failing because you skip. One missed day becomes one missed year, and one missed year becomes a wasted life. You say you want success. You say you want freedom. But if I examine your calendar, your morning, your night, what do I find? Gaps, hesitation, abandonment, drift. If you had simply repeated the right thought, the right action, the right aim daily, you would already be free. But you didn't. You skipped. You delayed. You gave yourself permission to rest before you built the rhythm that creates rest. And now you're asking why nothing has changed. This is not a speech. This is a warning, because if you skip this again, you will skip your future too. The universe does not reward the talented. It does not respond to the clever. It does not admire the inspired. It rewards the consistent. It moves not when you try, but when you repeat. You want life to obey you? Then return to your post. Return to your thought. Return to your discipline. All power belongs to the man who refuses to skip, and I mean daily. I mean without excuse. I mean when the feeling is gone. I mean when the room is empty. The man who returns to his purpose daily, even when tired, even when unseen, is the only man the law obeys. Not the man who sprints. Not the man who starts 1,000 fires. The man who returns. Do you want results? Stop asking for motivation. Start practicing obedience. You're not tired. You're undisciplined. You're not stuck. You're inconsistent. You're not lost. You've just stopped showing up for the plan you wrote when you still believed in yourself. Some men try. Other men train. Some men start. Other men never stop. There are two kinds of men in this world. The one who skips when life gets hard, and the one who becomes harder than life itself. This is the speech for the second kind, or the one willing to become him. You want results. You want peace. You want power. Build a man who does not miss. That man begins. Let me tell you a truth you've avoided. The results you want are already on the calendar. They are hidden in the repetition you were supposed to begin 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. The work was simple. The aim was clear, but you skipped. You skipped the day, the discipline, the declaration. And with each missed moment, you distance yourself from the man you were called to become. Success is not mysterious. It is not hidden. It is not magic. It is simply the compound interest of consistency. But most men can't hold the pattern long enough to see it work. They plant a seed and dig it up the next day. They speak their aim and then speak fear 5 minutes later. They act for 1 week and then wait to feel motivated again. But law does not move by feeling. Law moves by obedience. And the man who obeys even without emotion builds power that the world must acknowledge. I do not care how good your plan is. If you abandon it every time you're tired, you are still ruled by weakness. I do not care how deep your desire is. If you only act when it's convenient, you're not building a future. You're building a fantasy. Yeah. Consistency is not a personality trait. It is not a preference. It is not something men are better at. It is a spiritual law. You obey it or you fail. You live inside of it or you fall beneath it. You want wealth, then you must speak wealth daily. Move toward it daily. Affirm it daily. Build structure daily. Not when you feel like it. Not when the sun is out. Not when the motivation videos line up with your schedule. Daily, without fail, without apology. The man who becomes consistent becomes feared. Feared by his enemies, trusted by his allies, and watched by the world. Because when a man no longer skips, he becomes inevitable. He becomes certain. He becomes a force. Let me tell you now, everything you want, discipline, wealth, confidence, clarity, dominion, all of it is behind the wall called consistency. And the only way to tear it down is not with force, but with repetition. 1 strike per day, same place, same time, until the wall falls. I will show you in this speech how to build consistency not as a habit, but as a law of identity. How to become the man who no longer misses. How to train your mind to move, whether it wants to or not. How to make success the default pattern of your life. Not the lucky exception, but this will require war. Not against others, but against your emotion. Against your excuses. Against your old self who still believes in breaks before obedience. The self who thinks skipping once isn't dangerous. It is. 1 break destroys a pattern. 1 skip kills momentum. 1 weak moment justifies the next 100. You must now become aggressive with yourself. You must become the enforcer of your own law. You must say, I do not skip, not as an intention, but as an identity. And every action, every thought, every routine must bow to that sentence. So say this now, not quietly, not hopefully, but as a vow. I obey consistency as law. I do not skip. I repeat until I arrive. Again, I obey. Consistency is law. I do not skip. I repeat until I arrive. These are your opening lines. Let them tattoo themselves onto your soul. Let them become the new gatekeeper of your habits. Let them end the chapter of the man who only moved when it was easy. The man you were is over. The man who does not miss begins now. Let us continue. Let us continue. Inconsistency is not weakness. It is not forgetfulness. It is not harmless. Inconsistency is spiritual self-betrayal. It is the quiet permission you give yourself to remain average while speaking of greatness. It is the delay of destiny in the disguise of rest. It is the choice to break the very structure you once promised would carry your life forward. A man does not destroy himself in a day. He destroys himself in moments, in skipped mornings, in casual delays, in postponed rituals, in whispered excuses, in the voice that says, just this once. And so the path that began with fire turns into smoke. The vision that once lit his mind now collects dust behind a screen of justification. Drifting never announces itself loudly. Kick down your door. It taps on your shoulder. It whispers, you've earned a break. My day, you. It says you can catch up later. And so the man who once acted with precision starts to negotiate with the habits that made him strong. His calendar becomes cluttered. His voice loses conviction. His mind forgets the clarity it once commanded. And all of it began with one skipped day. The man who skips one skips again. And each time he does, his identity rewrites itself. No longer the man who builds. Now the man who bargains. No longer the man who finishes. Now the man who starts often but completes. No longer the man who walks with power. Now the man who apologizes for who he used to be. Let me tell you this truth. The moment you skip what you once declared sacred, you have chosen drift over discipline. You have allowed comfort to overtake command. And unless that pattern is broken swiftly, it will harden into habit. And habits become identity. And identity becomes fate. The world is full of men who almost became great. Men who had vision, skill, fire, but they could not hold a rhythm. They could not repeat. They could not wake up on time. They could not hold their tongue. They could not write their goal every morning. They could not say no to distraction. And so their life became one long excuse wrapped in emotion. A business does not collapse in a day. It collapses when its builder stops showing up every day. A body does not weaken in a week. It weakens when the man who once trained with urgency skips once, then twice, then always. A reputation is not ruined by one action. It is unraveled by the slow erosion of daily consistency. But I will tell you where the real tragedy lies. Not in what the man loses, but in who he could have become had he simply stayed the course. This is why consistency is not optional. It is law. The subconscious mind, which carries out every command you give it, does not respond to passion. It responds to repetition. It is not moved by how loudly you speak your goal once. It is trained only by how often you return to it. Speak it, live it, even when no one claps and nothing oohs. Yet it is not. You may have the right plan, the right aim, the right mentors, but if you skip the process, the result will never arrive. The man who wins is not always the man who moves fastest. He is the man who never misses. I tell you now, it is better to do a small thing consistently than to do a great thing occasionally. It is better to show up daily than to dazzle once and disappear, because identity is not built by emotion, it is built by habit. In the habit of showing up even when tired, even when unseen, even when tempted to justify rest. This is the difference between the man who builds and the man who dreams. Let me give you a warning. If you're telling yourself that missing one day isn't a problem, you've already begun to lose. Because the first missed day is not about results, it is about permission. It is about what you're teaching your mind to expect from you. And when your mind no longer takes you seriously, it stops building what you say. When you skip one day, you are not just delaying your goal. You are denying your identity. You are proving to yourself that your word is conditional. And the man who treats his word casually will never carry the weight of greatness. You must become violent with inconsistency. You must not excuse it. You must not justify it. You must not allow one weak moment to unravel a pattern that was destined to change your life, because when a pattern breaks, power breaks with it. And if you want that power back, you must begin again, not where you left off, but from below, rebuilding what you once betrayed. But the good news is this: consistency can be rebuilt, rhythm can be restored, the pattern can be restarted. And once the mind sees you return without apology, without negotiation, without weakness, it will begin again to obey you. Say this now: I show up regardless of mood. One day off is one day delayed. Again, I show up regardless of mood. One day off is one day delayed. These are not slogans. These are your new standards. Let them correct you. Let them wake you. Let them push you out of the bed when comfort says sleep. Let them turn your hand back to the work when distraction says scroll. Let them remind you that your future is not built in bursts but in daily fire. You must now build the man who shows up not as suggestion but as a law. You must no longer skip not because it's difficult but because it's unacceptable. You must treat your routine as sacred. Your discipline as holy. Your word is binding. And if you return to the action, the repetition, the structure, you will not need to wait long before results appear. Because consistency always wins, not sometimes, always, because the law cannot deny the man who repeats truth long enough for truth to manifest. All power belongs to the repeater, not to the man who is clever for a moment, but to the man who returns to the same work, the same thought, the same pattern day after day until the world has no choice but to yield. It is not the man who starts 1,000 things who becomes great, but the man who repeats one thing until it submits to his will. Consistency is the discipline of kings. Repetition is the crown that separates the builder from the beggar. Repetition is how empires are built, identities are formed, fortunes are carved, and immortality is earned. The thoughts you repeat become your beliefs. The beliefs you repeat become your attitude. The attitude you carry daily becomes your action, and action, when repeated, becomes character, habit, power. You do not become strong by thinking of strength. You become strong by returning to resistance again and again, until the weight that once crushed you becomes the weight you carry with ease. You do not become wealthy by speaking of money. You become wealthy by showing up to your aim until money has no choice but to follow. Every man I have studied who reached the heights of greatness possessed one common trait. He repeated what others abandoned. He did not need new ideas every week. He did not seek constant novelty. He found the truth and repeated it, found the aim and held it, found the path and walked it until the stones remembered his footsteps. Thomas Edison did not invent the electric light with inspiration. He did not receive a flash of brilliance and walk away with a working bulb. He failed thousands of times, but he did not change his direction. He did not abandon the aim. He repeated, tested, he refined. He kept showing up to the same question until it opened itself to him. And power. Persistence is repetition under resistance. It is the quality of a man who refuses to be denied. It is the inner fire that burns longer than frustration, longer than fatigue, longer than failure. It changed course when results delay, but delay is not denial. Delay is the testing ground. It is where the world asks, will you repeat long enough to deserve what you've requested? Most men begin with excitement and fade into indifference. Most men act with intensity and vanish into excuse. But the man who returns, the man who comes back to the same work with the same belief and the same aim, that man becomes unbreakable. Let me be clear. Daily discipline is not exciting. It does not entertain. It does not give immediate reward, but it is undefeated. The man who trains daily becomes the master. The man who reads his purpose daily becomes the embodiment of it. The man who holds one aim longer than others hold their distractions. That man will not be denied. You say you want power, then learn to repeat. Repeat the aim, repeat the action, repeat the discipline. Not until it's hard, until it's automatic, not until it feels good, until it becomes part of you. Your body must know your work like a prayer. Your mind must know your goal like a hymn. Your spirit must rise at the sound of your schedule. Let me tell you something few understand. Repetition builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. And when confidence becomes automatic, you become dangerous. Not because you are louder, but because you are steady. The loudest man in the room is often the most insecure. But the man who repeats his work without applause is the man who builds cathedrals. Say this now: I repeat my aim until the world obeys. I master by returning to the same place every day. Again, I repeat my aim until the world obeys. I master by returning to the same place every day. Let these sentences anchor your identity. Let them become your standard. Let them destroy the version of you who needed motivation before moving. Let them replace your craving for variety with your hunger for dominion. The difference between mastery and mediocrity is not ability. It is repetition. The man who repeats becomes the law. He becomes the reference point. He becomes the standard. People begin to measure themselves by him, not because he sought it, but because he earned it. Repetition is how the subconscious is programmed. It is how belief is formed. It is how thought becomes habit and habit becomes identity. You cannot skip the process. You cannot microwave mastery. You must return again and again until the man you're becoming no longer feels like someone else. Edison didn't invent because he was brilliant. He invented because he was loyal to the process. He stayed when others left. He returned when others quit. He repeated what others rushed. That is your standard now. Whatever your goal, whatever your craft, whatever your desire, write it down. Repeat it daily. Show up to it hourly. Return to it relentlessly. And do not waver. Do not skip. Do not question your direction every time a result delays. You are not here to chase inspiration. You are here to become the man who cannot be moved. You are here to become the repeater. The man who masters himself through repetition becomes unshakable. He builds faith through structure. He builds power through discipline. He builds greatness not through force, but through pattern. Do not ask if it's working. Ask if you are repeating. Do not ask when it will come. Ask how many more days of repetition are owed. Do not ask for shortcuts. Ask for strength to repeat longer than most men are willing to, because the secret is not hidden. The path is not lost. It is simply hard to repeat, and that is why most men fail. They don't finish because they don't return. But should not most men? Repeat after me once more. I repeat my aim until the world obeys. I master by returning to the same place every day. Now continue, return, and keep returning until nothing can stand before the man who did not stop. Emotion is the great distractor. It is the seducer of the undisciplined, the excuse of the weak, the invisible enemy that convinces men to abandon the very path they once declared sacred. Sacred. Emotion does not fight you with weapons. It whispers. It says not today. It says you're not ready. It says you deserve to rest. And so the man who once walked with fire begins to drift, not because the path changed, but because his mood did. Emotion is not truth. Emotion is not law. Emotion is not destiny. Emotion is wind. And the man who allows wind to steer his ship will never reach shore. He will circle in patterns. He will advance in bursts and collapse in fatigue. He will inspire others, but never complete himself. Let me speak plainly. Success is not based on how you feel. It is built on what you repeat. When you feel nothing at all, when you are tired, when you are flat, when you are angry, when the results are invisible, when no one is watching, that is where the real man is revealed. Not when conditions are perfect, but when emotion screams for escape and the man says, I do it anyway. A man does not rise because he feels like it. He rises because he is loyal to what he said he would do, regardless of what he feels in the moment. Feelings are not facts. Ideals are not facts. And the man who worships emotion will betray principle every time it asks for discomfort. The man who waits for inspiration will lose to the man who repeats without it. The man who waits for clarity will lose to the man who moves with decision. The man who waits for peace will lose to the man who creates it through repetition. Emotion must be ruled, not followed, not obeyed, ruled. Abraham Lincoln did not become great because he felt strong. He became great because he moved forward in spite of feeling weak. He was tormented by depression, by depression. He was mocked, attacked, and doubted. But he rose every day and walked forward, not because it felt good, but because it was required. His decisions were based on principle, not emotion. And principle, repeated with consistency, produces greatness. Emotion followed blindly produces delay, regret, and loss. How many times have you spoken a goal in passion, only to abandon it when the fire cooled? How many times have you promised yourself change only to trade it for comfort when the hour of action arrived? That is not because your goal was wrong. It's because your emotions were still in charge. You cannot be ruled by emotion and expect to build anything permanent. You cannot build a structure on moving sand. The man who builds must first fix his inner foundation, not on inspiration, but on repetition, on obedience, on law. This is why I tell you replace the question, do I feel like it, with is this part of the law? That is the only question that matters because the law does not ask about your feelings. It does not pause when you are tired. It does not stop when you are frustrated. Oh, the law rewards only the man who returns to it. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is freedom because discipline silences emotion. Discipline overrides confusion. Discipline removes the option to quit, and once the option is gone, results become inevitable. Let me ask you this.